Mark Cuban was once so broke, he slept on the floor of a crowded apartment with 6 other people. No money, no connections, no backup plan, just a 24-year-old who had been fired from his job and was running out of options. A few years later, he would become a billionaire. But what makes Mark Cuban different isn't just the money, it's that he survived one of the biggest financial collapses in history while almost everyone else lost everything. And the move that saved him? It became one of the greatest trades Wall Street had ever seen, before the billion-dollar deals, before Shark Tank, before owning the Dallas Mavericks. Mark Cuban was just a kid in Pittsburgh trying to earn enough money to buy basketball shoes. When he asked his father for a new pair, his dad gave him a lesson instead.
If you want something, earn it.
So at 12 years old, Mark started selling trash bags door to door, then stamps, then baseball cards, anything he could flip for profit. Even back then, Cuban hated depending on other people for money. While most kids his age were focused on school or sports, Mark was obsessed with one thing: freedom. He realized early that being poor meant other people controlled your life, your boss controlled your schedule, your landlord controlled where you lived, and your bank account controlled every decision you made. That fear became fuel. And unlike most entrepreneurs, Mark Cuban wasn't trying to look successful, he was trying to escape failure. Even as a teenager, Cuban understood something most adults never learn: money flows toward people who can spot opportunities before everyone else. But spotting opportunities and succeeding are two very different things. At 24 years old, Cuban launched his first real business. It failed in 30 days, he was nearly broke again. So he moved to Dallas with almost nothing to his name. At one point, he was sleeping on the floor of an apartment packed with roommates. Then came the moment that changed everything. Cuban got a job at a software store. One day, he closed a massive $15,000 sale, but instead of congratulating him, his boss fired him. Why? Because Cuban skipped opening the store that morning to finalize the deal. For most people, that would have been devastating. For Mark Cuban, it became fuel. The very next day, he started his own company, MicroSolutions. There was just one problem. He had no real technology background, so while competitors slept, Mark Cuban studied, obsessively. He read manuals for hours every night, teaching himself skills nobody else wanted to learn. Friends later described Cuban during this period as completely consumed by work. He wasn't balanced, he wasn't relaxed, and he definitely wasn't living the glamorous entrepreneur lifestyle people imagine today. He was obsessed. While other people went out on weekends, Cuban stayed home reading software manuals and studying technology trends. He believed knowledge was the ultimate competitive advantage, because if you could learn faster than everyone else, you could eventually beat people smarter, richer, and more experienced than you. And, slowly, it started working. To land early customers, Cuban made insane promises. If the software failed, he would clean their cars, walk their dogs, scrub their floors, whatever it took. For 7 straight years, he didn't take a vacation, not one. Then in 1990, everything changed. He sold MicroSolutions for $6 million. Mark Cuban had officially become a millionaire. Most people would have stopped there. He didn't, because another opportunity was quietly forming: the internet. And almost nobody understood how massive it was about to become. At the time, most people thought the internet was a joke. Companies didn't understand it, investors barely understood it, and average people had no idea how dramatically it was about to change the world. But Cuban saw something others missed. He realized the internet wasn't just another technology, it was a completely new way for information to move across the planet, and if he could build a business around that shift early enough, the upside could be enormous. In 1994, Cuban and his friend Todd Wagner had a simple idea. What if people could stream basketball games online? Today that sounds normal. Back then, it sounded insane. The company became AudioNet, later renamed Broadcast.com, and suddenly, they were streaming everything: sports, radio, live events, even a Victoria's Secret fashion show that overwhelmed internet traffic across the country. The company exploded. The timing couldn't have been crazier. The late 90s became one of the wildest investing periods in American history. Companies with almost no revenue were suddenly worth billions. Investors were pouring money into anything connected to the internet. And for a brief moment, it felt like the rules of business had completely changed. But Mark Cuban noticed something dangerous. The excitement was turning into irrational hype, and hype never lasts forever. Then came the deal that changed Mark Cuban's life forever. Yahoo bought Broadcast.com for $5.7 billion in stock. Overnight, Cuban became one of the richest entrepreneurs in America. But there was a problem. The money wasn't really cash, it was tied to Yahoo stock, and deep down, Mark Cuban believed the entire internet bubble was about to collapse. Most people ignored the warning signs. Cuban didn't, so he made a move that would later become legendary on Wall Street. He protected his shares using a strategy called a costless collar. Mike Dine Dispampo, Condraspans. Basically, patron den endis de dine den, do kan bapon por. He guaranteed he could still sell his Yahoo stock at a high price, even if the market completely crashed. And then, the crash came. The dot-com bubble exploded, Yahoo stock collapsed, companies vanished overnight, fortunes disappeared, millions of investors got wiped out. The crash destroyed careers overnight. Employees who thought they were millionaires suddenly had worthless stock options. Entire companies disappeared. Some investors lost their life savings chasing the internet boom. But Mark Cuban had already protected himself before the collapse happened. That decision didn't just preserve his wealth. It proved he understood risk better than almost everyone around him. Because making money is one skill, keeping it is another. And that's the moment Mark Cuban stopped being just another entrepreneur and became a business legend. But instead of disappearing into luxury, he bought an NBA team. In 2000, Cuban purchased the Dallas Mavericks for $285 million. At the time, the franchise was struggling, but Cuban completely changed how NBA teams operated. He upgraded private jets, nutrition, training staff, recovery programs. He treated players like investments, and slowly, the Mavericks transformed into champions. And Cuban became one of the most recognizable owners in all of sports, not because he stayed hidden in luxury suites, but because he acted more like a fan than a billionaire. He argued with referees, sat courtside screaming during games, and regularly took massive fines from the NBA for speaking his mind publicly. Fans loved him for it. Because unlike most billionaire owners, Mark Cuban actually looked like he cared. But even after becoming a billionaire sports owner, Mark Cuban still wasn't finished building. Today he's taking on an entirely different industry, big pharma. Through cost-plus drugs, Cuban is trying to expose what he calls the middleman scam inside healthcare by dramatically lowering prescription prices. And strangely enough, it's the exact same mindset he had as a kid selling trash bags. Find inefficiencies, move faster than everyone else, and never stop pushing. Today, Mark Cuban's net worth fluctuates in the billions, but what's interesting is that he still talks about business the same way he did decades ago. He still believes speed matters, he still believes learning matters, and he still believes most people underestimate how hard successful entrepreneurs actually work. Because behind every billion-dollar outcome, there are usually years of invisible sacrifice nobody sees. That's the real story of Mark Cuban. Not luck, not connections, not perfect timing, relentless obsession, because while everyone else was sleeping, Mark Cuban was still reading the manual. And decades later, he still is.